Hello, how are you?
Oh, doing great, thanks.
Yes. So my name is Aaliyah. I will be working with Five Points Neighborhood Association with their Celebration of Wisdom series, and I will be joined today with Miss Sharon Keefer.
Hi.
Let me read her introduction. So Miss Sharon Keefer is a professional life coach. She attended the University of Phoenix and she has a Bachelor of Arts degree in management. She's retired from Salt River Project. My apologies. Um, she also does volunteer work and she works in the crisis text line and chat line for support anyone in crisis and in need. She's also affiliated with the court-appointed special advocate, and she has one son and three grandkids, and she also loves gardening and reading as a hobby. Did I miss anything, Miss Kiefer?
Not at all, just that my grandkids are now in their teens, so I'm calling them grand teens.
Grand teens, I love that.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, can you give a little bit more background about you going into life coaching? What inspired you to do that?
Oh my gosh. One day I was watching Oprah and a woman named Debbie Ford was on, and she had such great strategies about how to be happier and how to get unstuck from problems that you had, that right away I bought her book. And after that, I went to a seminar and she was just starting to train coaches. And I signed up for the training at the seminar. And the rest is just history.
And how old were you when you had this encounter with this
I
show?
was in my 40s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so right then and there, you knew this is something that I want to do.
It was like, then I understood what calling meant. It was my
Mm,
calling to help people transform from things that they're stuck in and have roadblocks and have like heavy emotional pain. Um, because I went through in that 3 day seminar such big changes that I thought this is what I want to work with people.
How has your perception of calling changed since, you've had that, I want to say epiphany, I guess, of that from then to now. So how has your perception of calling changed, if it has?
It still feels like a calling and it feels like it doesn't feel like work.
Okay.
I'm always energized by it and it feels like a hobby and uh and work.
And work.
Yeah.
So I want to ask this because you do have one son. How different is it, like giving him advice versus giving, your clients professional advice? What does
Hmm.
that look like? How different?
Well, it has helped me a lot, and I think my son appreciates it because unless he asks me for advice, I never give advice.
Mm.
We think of that when we think of coaching or counseling, but really, I ask powerful questions, and that makes people kind of dive in. And when they find the answers, they start to know what they need to do.
What are some things you've learned about yourself, like through the process of giving others advice? Because I'm sure you struggle with some things, and I don't know if you have a life coach yourself. So how do you work through things while also helping other people?
Yeah, most of the time, I haven't been actively coaching for several years. I'm just starting up again and putting
Okay.
the business online. But all the time that I was coaching, I had to coach myself. And you
Mm.
kind of need that so that you're taking care of your own issues and you're not like taking the adoration of the client or the client thinking, you're doing so great for them. You're not feeding off of that.
Yes.
And that you have a sense of what pain someone else is going through because you're going through it. So one of the things that it really helped me with was I have a special training in divorce. And even though my divorce had been years before, I didn't realize I still had some emotional feelings about it and about myself from it. And so that helped me be more accepting of myself and of my ex-husband.
What is the most common, like, because you're mentioning divorce, and while we're on this topic, I want to ask this question. What is the most common, like, misconceptions about divorce? And that's a very general question. So, what is
Sure.
something that you see people are saying about it that isn't totally true?
They have a lot of judgments about good and bad.
Mm.
and about their partner doing something to them and like intentionally. And really, most of the time, people are just doing the best they can. They just can't do better or more. They, we react like how we were trained and raised.
Yeah.
And so things get to be a fight and they don't have to be. That's a pretty big misconception.
And what is the number one issue you see? Because I'm sure you've met couples going through it. What is the number one issue and how can they counterattack that? Like before it happens, how can they prevent getting to that space where they need to, have a conversation about divorce?
Right. It can be on many topics, but it's that they don't feel heard or they don't
Mm.
feel appreciated. And so if you can work on your communication skills, um, you can avoid that.
Can you give me like a communication tip? So what example would
Sure.
you give me?
Listen. When you listen, listen to understand, not to be making your case in your head while they're talking of how you're going to respond back. Listening, I learned from the crisis text line a lot of times people, especially younger people, call in crisis and really they're not getting listened to, or their parents are telling them, oh, it's you're just growing up and there'll be this pain and just deal with it, and they're not feeling validated.
How do you think they can work on how would you say, because I know you mentioned like a lot of younger people, and sometimes it's hard, I'm a young person myself, so it's hard to kind of like reach out and even ask for help. So what do you think that is? Like, what is preventing us from taking that step to asking for it? Like, is it something internalized? And can you give like language to that feeling?
Yeah, usually they've been put down for asking earlier on. And so that you've learned by 6 or 7, oh, I'm not going to aggravate dad by showing my feelings, or I'm not going to make my mom mad by complaining about whatever it is. So you kind of learn it earlier on, and it takes some courage. It takes courage to reach out. And we can normalize that a little bit by also the adults reaching out and they see that as an
Wow.
example.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned like around 6 or 7 because I feel like I know you don't work, so you specialize in like early childhood development, but you could see how that could influence how we react to things in the future. So could you just
Yes.
speak a little more to that?
Well, we're all actually being run by that 5, 6, or 7-year-old inside of us.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. It kind of depends on how you're raised. Our feelings and emotions are so cemented by that time that that's how we see the world. I don't think I hit your question. Ask me again. What
Oh, well, no, you actually answered it
did I?
perfectly.
Okay.
Yes, you did. And a
Okay.
follow-up question to that, because again, I'll go back to your mother. So, what are some ways that you've made your child feel validated and heard, and like give tips to parents to, create this space of vulnerability to where your kids can come to you if they need something and not shut you out? So, what are some tips
Right.
you would give?
It's the listening. I'm
Okay.
big on the listening and then saying what you've heard, not saying a judgment about it. So if you say that it's not to your parent, it's not fair that Billy got to do this and I didn't get to do it, or the kids are making fun of me. If you give your opinion, then from your adult point of view, just ignore Billy. Pretty soon he'll get picking on somebody else and you'll be fine. Or don't whine, be a big boy. But if you listen and say, oh, it sounds like you're really hurt, or it sounds like you
Mhm.
hurt your feelings, it sounds like you're upset, and then let them tell you more.
So, just listening and allowing them to flow.
Right. And then just validate their feeling. You don't have to think that that's how you do it or whatever, but you can validate. I see that really hurt you.
That's a really,
Yeah.
really, really good tip.
Yeah.
Steering back over to marriage. Okay, so what are some conflicts that you feel like you have contributed to in your marriage that you could have prevented? Or what
Mm.
advice would you give to someone maybe entering marriage, or they're going through something right now and they just can't seem to work through it? What advice would you give?
It might sound a little corny, but to remember that you're both on the same team. So if you think of it like tennis and playing doubles, you two are on one side of the net. The problem is over there. So you two coordinate a solution to that problem. He's not the problem and she's not the problem. And sometimes we're just trying to build up our case and convince one or the other that they're right or wrong. And when you do that, then there's always somebody who loses. So if you can coordinate and come up with it's you two against the problem, you can usually come up with a better solution.
I love that analogy. That was a really good analogy.
Mm.
Um, so working together. And I feel like it takes work to even get to that place to acknowledge that you're in the wrong. Because, there's so many people that wants to be right.
Ah,
And it's like it takes so much work to even get to that place. So is there any like practical things you can do? Maybe like journaling or a book you would suggest? Like, what do you think we can do
mm,
to work on like, to the self-work?
right. Um, Definitely journaling about how something made you feel
Hmm.
and reading some basic I was trying to think of a book. Oh, I know the Gottmans, John Gottman and his wife. They are psychologists who work totally with couples, and they have lots of, like, they have, John Gottman has done research for 40 years, maybe 50. He can predict with a 90% accuracy when he has couples if they're going to divorce or not. He has, and he has really practical things like the four things that make the conflict and can lead to divorce: criticism, stonewalling, where you won't respond or you give them the silent treatment, contempt, and I forget the next one. But contempt is the one that when he observes contempt, where you're like you're better or smarter
Hmm.
than the other person. Contempt is the leading factor that he sees that leads to divorce, that if they can't work through the contempt, it's not going to happen for them.
Wow. I just love like I feel like this it's so much wisdom in those type of books. And I'm sure you've come across many other books. So I want to ask you this question. As a
Okay.
life coach, because I know you do a lot of reading, you do a lot of coaching. What
Yes.
is the best piece of advice you've heard or someone has given to you that has shaped the way you see the world today?
Mm. So many. That's a great question. Um, I think it's to approach things with a beginner's mind. So you don't have a right or a wrong. So, like, if you look out the window and it's raining, that's what's happening. It's not a bad day because it's raining and you're going to get wet. It's not a good day because you love to open the windows and bake cookies when it's raining. It's just raining. And if you can leave your judgment out, you can see the path better.
I love that. I want to
Thanks.
dive I want to dive a little deeper into your younger years. Because I know
Okay.
you said you were introduced to the Oprah show around 40-ish.
Yes.
So tell me about Miss Sharon when she was a teenager in her
Oh,
20s. Like what were you like then?
okay.
How were you?
All right. Well, I was overweight. And that has shaped my entire life and my whole self-image. And so in the teens and 20s, I was so self-conscious about my weight because you're making friends, you're trying to date, all those things. And you just become aware, oh, maybe the boys don't like you so much, or maybe the clothes don't fit in the store, or maybe certain things aren't for you. And so that was a real big organizing principle in my mind, and my self-esteem for that wasn't good. My self-image wasn't good. And so I probably took more than I would have if I had more self-confidence. On the other side, I was really good at organizational and people things. So in high school, I enjoyed being in some of the clubs or participating in the activities.
Hmm.
Um, but really being overweight totally affected how I felt.
So being overweight. And this is, you said, around teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge topic. I was trying to, like, in my head as you were speaking, I could like resonate with some of that stuff, like as a woman in general, we deal with like body image a lot. And
Oh,
especially in this
yes.
age, like the age of social media, all you're doing is scrolling and comparing and comparing. And
Oh,
it's
yes.
detrimental. It really is. And like we were just talking about, the effects of that, on your mental health. So how did
Yes.
you get out of that? I know you mentioned going into something else, like putting your focus on organization and joining things, but what do you say to the girls now who are dealing with that and maybe they don't have the skills that you have, maybe they can't, it seems dark and they can't find a way out of that. Like what advice would you give to them?
Well, first, I just have to give them so much credit because I didn't have that pressure of being able to see many more images and more things that people were doing. I just only had like a local neighborhood and, well, television,
Yeah.
view of body image and how things went. So um, for girls, I wish they could know that they're unique and special, and your body is like kind of almost the least important thing about you. It carries you around,
Yeah.
but it's it's really not the important thing. I'm trying to think of what advice that I
Mhm.
would give a young girl, young woman,
Yeah,
because it
like
does.
you're so much more than your body, you know?
You are so much more than your body. It is just the least important thing about you. But it took me a long time to get there.
Hmm.
Um, in fact, it the one of the final pushes that I had where I really made a change was really within the last 10 years.
Hmm.
And I took a class based on Brene Brown's um, books. I don't know which one it was, but my therapist was well versed in shame. And Brene Brown had about shame in her book,
Hmm.
and that shame lives in the darkness, and it's only when we can expose it to the light that we can deal with it. And this was a weekend workshop I went to, and overnight, between the first day and the second day, we had to make a poster of our shame. Well, my shame is body shame, and it still was then. So I found a picture of Jabba the Hutt from Star Wars. I don't know
Oh
if you're
yeah.
familiar, but big,
Hmm.
fat, gooey, dripping, oozing character. And I blew it up and I put it on the poster. And then I found the letters to make the word like gross, and just two or three words. And I took that in and said what my shame was. And actually, when I turned my poster around and people saw Jabba the Hutt, they
Wow.
just gasped to
Hmm.
think that,
You viewed
that's
yourself
what
as
I'm
that.
carrying around. That's how
Hmm.
I think of myself. If you can wait a minute, I'll show you how I've changed. I've got to get something from the other side of the room. Would that
Yeah,
work?
that's fine.
Okay, hold
Yes.
on because it's life changing.
Okay. I
Okay,
will wait.
okay. I've gone from holding up a poster of Jabba the Hutt. I don't know where you can see this. This is me
Oh my gosh, I
in a
love
pho
that.
in a photo shoot. So I signed up for this project that a local photographer was doing, and it's called Embrace Your Beauty, and it's women over 40. And you had a whole photo shoot where you go in and you bring 5 outfits. So they have a stylist have a Zoom call with you and go through your outfits that you picked out at home. You go in and you do hair and makeup, which is just not, I mean, professionally hair and makeup is just like, oh my gosh, and you start to feel different. And
Yes.
then I had 5 outfit changes and and very many poses. And so for me, I spent most of my life avoiding the camera.
Mm.
And it was only 20 years ago that I would get in the camera because I realized there's no history of me for like 30 years of my life, as much as I could hide. And I really felt that that there's no history of me with my son in the picture together because I'm staying out. So that kind of hurt me that I had done
Mhm.
that. So for me to sign up for a photo shoot, put myself
Yes.
on purpose in front of the camera and know that she has the rights to use these pictures however she wants promotionally as well. And then there was a big reveal for the 40 of us and our families and friends. It was a huge step. And so I'll be forever grateful that I had the courage to sign up and do it. And to me, having the Job of the Hut poster or that one next to each other says more with just a look than I could say in words.
I love how you went from being shy and wanting to be behind the camera to like on the cover. Like I love that.
Here I am.
So
Yeah.
you're showing you're telling me something. You're telling me that it gets better with age. You're telling me
It
that if you work, you can get there.
it gets better with age. And it doesn't have to be as advanced of an age as I'm at, but it gets better all along. It's just that we can't see that in the early times.
Yeah.
When we're teens, we don't know that in 3 months this is going to be better. In two
Yeah.
years, we can't even picture that. Yeah,
Yeah, we can't fathom it because like we're living in it, we're present in it. So we can't
right.
think that far ahead.
No, no. That's why I love the crisis text line because well, people of any age in any crisis, from my boyfriend broke up with me to I'm going to cut or I'm going to find some way to die because I can't stand this any longer. It could be anything. Um, so many of the people were 17 and under. And sometimes you would hear some of these just hard stories from 13-year-olds, and you only knew their age if they told you because it's totally confidential. You don't know
Hmm.
who you're talking to, but I just really saw that on the crisis text line. And what I saw was that in 30 or 40 minutes of listening and some questions, people could go from this really hot moment to a cool down moment where they could think and move on. But they can't see the whole future. They could just see, okay, tonight I'm going to be okay.
And where can they find the crisis text line? Is there a website? Is there a phone number? Because I'll put it below here.
Oh, I've been away from it for a while. Now I'm going to have a
Okay.
hard time. Can I give it to you after?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll put it on the
Because
screen
it's
here.
you just text. So there's no voice, there's no picture, there's nothing but text. And
Okay.
that kind of lets people, you can text your problem without your parents even knowing you're talking to somebody about your personal life or
Person.
them or whatever. And so
Okay.
it's all volunteer and it's a super organization.
So it's just like completely confidential. You don't have to worry about things.
Yeah, no, totally
Okay.
confidential.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah, I can
Because
probably look it up while we're talking.
yeah, for sure. I would love if you did
Okay.
that.
Oh, I don't know how I forgot this. You just text 741 and you text the word home and you're there.
Text the word home and you're there. Okay. And someone will get connected to you immediately.
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, and then we'll be closing up. Just a little bit about you being an advocate for foster care children. Can you speak a little bit about that? Like, how was that experience? What did you learn about it?
Boy,
Mhm.
um, I haven't done it for several years. I did it for 2 years and I saw one case from start to finish. And it was very hard because all the systems that the foster children are needing are pretty broken, at least here. So there's the court system, the child protective services, just any benefit services. So it took a lot of perseverance. I was what happens when you're the CASA is you tend to be the one who's with the child from the beginning of their case to the end of where they're going to get placed and if it's a good placement because the social workers change and the lawyers change and everybody is kind of rotating in and out of these jobs, child protective services. So you kind of end up being the one who knows what's happened with the case all the way through.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a big responsibility. And the judge takes your report into consideration just as much as he takes everyone else's. And the hard part for me to learn, and I'll just admit I couldn't do it after the first case, is because you're working to place the child with his or her blood relatives, if at all possible. And so they don't
Mhm.
have, it doesn't have to be the best interest of the child, just the minimally okay, meeting the standards, keeping them in the family,
Yeah.
which I do understand. But it was hard at every point except for just dealing with my little foster child, who I would visit about every 2 weeks.
And what is something you learned about children in the process?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sure there's many things you've come across and seen, and
Yeah, they're so resilient.
oh, I love that.
Um, they're they're happy in the midst of not a great situation, and it doesn't take much to make them happy. Some attention, um, and some time. So I guess their resiliency.
I love that. It doesn't take much. I love that so much.
Mm-mm.
I'm gonna ask, as we wrap up, what is a word of advice,
Okay.
word of wisdom you can give to younger generations? What is an issue? You've been a life coach for a couple years now, right? So what are some
Mm-hmm.
things that you could tell the younger generation, to kind of help them fight through any struggles or, any conflict they're going through within their relationships, whether that be parental or platonic or, whatever the case may be. What advice can you give them?
One thing I'd want to tell them is that their feelings are real and it's okay to have those feelings.
Mhm.
So whether people around you think that's good or bad, you're entitled to have your feelings. You may have to find a way to work them out, but you're entitled to have your feelings and there's nothing wrong with you. I think if younger people, almost any age person, could just know they're okay, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not a problem. You're going through a problem.
I love that.
If there's any way to keep that perspective and that things are going to work out, and try to talk to people about it.
Okay. That concludes our meeting. Thank you so much for joining me, Miss Sharon.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Yes.